With Dr. John Weil here from MTSU, 737+ if you would like to call in to discuss the midterm elections. Before we get to Tennessee, Professor, it looks like at this point that it's still the GOP will gain control of the House, just not by as much as they hoped. So still, that is a victory for them. The Senate, we know, hanging in the balance. We'll see what happens there, but it'll still be, pretty close. Some of these vote totals, when you look at them, it is amazing. A total of like almost 6 million votes in some states, and there's a separation of 20,000. 10,000,
Yes.
What do you think? Are we really this divided, or?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, I'm an optimist, and I would like to think that really most of America is more purple than we think, and that just the far right and the far left are the loudest voices, and kind of dominate.
I think that's often true.
Dominate, and I like to think that the majority of voters out there are reasonable. That they're going to hold some values and, issues they'll be strong on, but others, they understand how government works, and they just want reasonable people in Washington sit down at a table, try to come to a compromise. It's just not happening these days.
Well, on the other, in some states you have relative I mean, you're right. The greater differences between states than there is sometimes within states.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, look how closely divided Georgia is right now. This is like the third, I believe, runoff election that they've had in the last 2 years or so. So, and again, it was less complicated. In some ways, it's easier to understand when every election becomes a national election.
Yeah.
It used to be many elections were just, they were basically driven by local issues or state issues rather than national issues.
Obviously, Jim Cooper, longtime congressman here in District 5, for a long time, and some might argue, but considered what's called a blue dog Democrat, or a relative moderate, and for years Tennessee was seen as, we had Governor Bredesen, a Democrat, Governor Haslam, but generally moderate. Even in the Senate we had Lamar Alexander, who had been governor, who I know a lot of Democrats didn't agree with all, but he was still seen as an intelligent man who worked well with the other side. Bob Corker, when he was elected, we thought, a lot of folks thought he was too far right, but he ended up being, to me, an extremely reasonable, well-liked senator. They're all gone now. It seems like these moderates are just being pushed out. Even in Tennessee, on the state level, when I started here 17 years ago, I think the legislature was in the Democrats' hands, and we have just shifted.
Yes.
So what's going on? How states like Florida are now really red. Other states that have been red are, I understand the demographics are changing, but other states are turning more blue. There's a shift. What do you think here in Tennessee is going on? Because obviously we don't have the moderates in leading positions anymore.
You're right, and Howard Baker would be another one,
yeah.
And for that matter, I think even the Gores, were relatively moderate. So it is a big change. And, a colleague and I, Dr. Burns, who's now our provost here, did a book some years back on Tennessee politics, and sort of the outstanding feature was whether they were Republican or Democrat, the McWhorters of the world, they knew how to work with the other side in a way that the current ones do not. A lot of it seems to be motivated by, by social issues. A lot of people seem to approach politics. They seem more enraged than they used to be.
Yeah, and it's kind of an entrenched ideology. It's funny because I remember reading about, and it was a big shift as Tennessee shifted to start luring automotive manufacturing and other business here to the state.
Yes.
To get Volkswagen in Chattanooga, and Volkswagen was looking, this was a big deal. They were looking at a number of other states recording them, but it was, I believe it was Governor Bredesen at the time, but it was Senator Alexander. Bob Corker at the time was mayor,
Yes.
I think, in Chattanooga. So all over the board, but they came together and made it happen. And I think I read that the German leaders from Volkswagen really appreciated their attitude, the way they were, just liked everything about what they
Right.
were pitching, right? Yeah, we just don't have that.
Well, in part, now we are still fairly attractive to outside businesses, and in
yeah.
part it's because we have, relatively low labor union membership. Prices compared to many other states are still, relatively moderate, although certainly housing prices are going up very fast. But yeah, we do seem, we seem to be losing it. I think some of that will diminish with Trump, if Trump does sort of fade out. But, it's hard to know what lesson people are drawing. I think the lesson some people are drawing is, whichever side you're on, the people that are really going to matter are the people who are going to contribute, the people who are going to come out and work for you. If you have to say something outrageous, say it. And I'm sort of hoping that we could go back to a bit more gentlemanly or gentle ladily
Well,
approach.
yeah, I notice even in the newsroom, we get news releases sent to us from our congressional leaders and others. And, just one little thing happens on the federal level, and right away, and maybe it's Senator Hagerty's office or Senator Blackburn's office or one of the send out, and they're just, the whole tone of these news releases are completely different. They're just right away prepared and just bashing the other side, and no sign of any solution or any type of, hey, we can find a compromise. So let's talk about the takeaways here in Tennessee. Obviously a big win for Governor Lee for re-election, which is Tennesseans.
Yes.
Pat Nolan and I talked about it election night. Tennesseans like to send their governors back on both sides
They
to
do.
a second term, but the redistricting, it paid off for Republicans. They flipped a seat.
It did for this election. Usually you don't reapportion for another 10 years, and sometimes people end up getting bit by.
Yeah.
They overthink it, and before you know it, the population has changed, and it doesn't quite work to their advantage as they thought it would. But you have the Republican governor in power and a Republican legislature when the apportionment is being done.
Right.
And one of the fascinating things about this election is how close, I could be off by one or two, but I think last time I looked, it was like 24 governors maybe who were Democrat and 26 Republican. And if you added the states, the population of the states, it'd probably be maybe even the opposite way. But in any event, well, both sides, of course, engage in gerrymandering.
Yeah.
But if you keep it relatively easy, I was listening to someone last night who was, I forget which election it was, but they were encouraging the candidate. They said, we've got to challenge this election. We know our opponent stole Illinois. And he said, yeah, but we stole Kentucky. So as long as everybody's doing it, they're relatively equal.
This gerrymandering issue, there's so many kind of accusations made, and just the word gerrymandering carries a negative. And I have told people, if they approach me and say, what do you think of this? I say, well, if you want to change it, you got to elect who you want. That the legislature, like you said, they have a super majority. I said, you should have seen the writing on the wall. They had the power, and every 10 years this comes up. And, in other states that are real blue, they do the same thing. They're looking for an advantage. It is not illegal. Politically, you could say, well, it might be unethical, but it is not. And I believe a court, once they presented this new redistricting, a court takes a look at it. And if the court says it's fine, we don't find anything wrong, anything unconstitutional, then it goes forward. So I say to Democrats who are upset, you got 10 years now. You got to work hard. You got to get good candidates, get your message out. I mean, I know that state Democrats know that, but it just hasn't happened for them. Maybe the law will change, but right now that's the way the law is. They got to carve it up, and they got the seat that they wanted.
Right. Some states have gone to nonpartisan commissions that seem to have worked pretty well. The U.S. Supreme Court has basically said these are political issues, that there's really no fundamental way for them to decide. But there's a fascinating case that's coming up before the court this term as to whether state constitutions, if you have an equal protection clause or something similar to that, if some of those state constitutions might be a basis for state courts to overrule some apportionment on the basis of their state constitution.
Yeah, especially if there are real issues about specific demographic groups, and there have been these issues raised of being, disenfranchised, which it should be looked into. It's very legitimate. I want to read real quick
Well, and again,
Go ahead.
The court has accepted some challenges based on drawing on the basis of race, but so far they have not the U.S. Supreme Court has not intervened in the cases of partisan gerrymandering.
Right. The Tennessean writes in their takeaways thing, Melissa Brown and Adam Friedman, by the way, I want to give them credit for this article, talking about Andy Ogles, the Murray County mayor who has won the new redrawn 5th district. The redistricting effort engineered by a legislative Republican supermajority earlier this year now means Nashville voters are represented in Washington by 3 Republicans, none of whom live in Davidson County, which is kind of remarkable.
Yes. Well, one of the most important apportionment cases in U.S. history came out of Tennessee. Baker versus Carr in 1962, that was the case where the Supreme Court said the Constitution does require districts of approximately equal size, or it is justiciable. And then in Reynolds versus Sims, they decided the one person, one vote principle. But what gerrymandering shows is you can have districts of equal numbers and still have it favoring one party or another.
Absolutely. All right, we got a phone call. We really appreciate it. Let's go to Linda on line 1. Linda, thanks for calling in. What's on your mind?
Well, this is more about the national election.
Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to ask what you think of some of the politicians from Georgia, like, for instance, that Marjorie Taylor Greene, and of course Herschel Walker. I mean, if anyone's watched any of his speeches or anything, he is not, I don't think he's qualified to be a senator.
Okay.
And I can't believe he's done as well as he has. It's unreal.
Yeah, hugely popular, and I haven't followed that closely. I know that he he has a real Southern accent, and his whole push, Dr. Weil, is that I'm not a politician, but in Georgia, obviously, we'll let you listen in here, Linda, sorry. In Georgia, he's, hugely popular, of course, being a football star from the University of Georgia, but I didn't see, I maybe saw a few outtakes of the debate, and he's facing Senator Warnock, Raphael Warnock, the Democrat, who speaks to people all the time. He's been a politician and a preacher.
He's a very polished speaker.
Very polished. What's your takeaway there? And what, this runoff, it was close, but Herschel Walker has some ground to make up.
He does. Again, this is the virtue and the vice of democracy. One of the most interesting things that I saw during this campaign was Obama coming down to Georgia and knowing that he needed to start by saying, I love football. I love watching Herschel Walker carry the football down the field. But if I were going to get on a plane, I don't think I'd ask him to pilot the plane. Or if I needed surgery, I don't think I'd hand him a scalpel. And I think that's, we sometimes substitute name recognition and popularity and equate that with competence or experience, and obviously the two don't always coincide.
Right. Real quick before we go to the break, by the way, and we're talking about, the redistricting, the carving of the 5th, 6th, and 7th here in the mid-state. The boundaries may be different, but generally speaking, you were talking about the representation in each one. I think all congressional districts, the number that they shoot for in each district is about 760,000 people, or 761.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be spot on,
Yes.
but, you know, generally in that
Yes.
area so that each are represented. I wanted to mention that. Hope for more calls after this. We'll be right back.